Okay, hello everyone. So I work in the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, and I worked in the Chinese University of Hong Kong. So now it's good to be back, after, I guess, how many years for that one. So I wanted to highlight, the presentation today. To the presentation today, you will probably find out, well, we mostly talk about education as teaching and learning, right? I mean, we don't usually highlight just learning. Why? Well, the reason is what I'm telling you today is learning from the student's perspective, because think about it. I am old, but I was also a young person once, right? But when an old person trying to think about the old days, what students would do, sometimes, well, memory will create certain effects because my background is also in psychology. You say we're always influenced by our experience before. Now, given that I'm actually not trained as an English language teacher, not like a stand-up comedian either, I was trained as a historian. But history has one very interesting element. It's called story, right? So I'm going to tell you a story. And the story is based on real incidents and real facts. Because I think well, you don't want to see a stand-up comedy. I'm probably not the right person. I have to do the costume and everything, for that one. Okay, all right. So, okay, all right. Well, in that case, maybe I can move it here.
It's working.
Okay, all right. So, well, okay, all right. Yeah, so I touched in the wrong place. So you can see that I'm actually old now because my technology was still in that stage because we used it about 10 years ago. So that's why, I've got something that I'm actually familiar with. So what I'm telling you is about the perceptions about about 300 students, perceptions about certain issues here. So the presentation will run like this. The introduction will tell you about the background of this research and the context and the method. This is a cross-cultural study, or some people say, well, not really cross-cultural, it's like comparative study. I would probably say comparative study. And I'll talk a little bit about data analysis and conclusion and things here. Now, given that it's 3 o'clock already, so I think the energy level or the concentration level is I guess maybe going up. No, I'm just kidding. So I think I'll try to make myself clearer. So you will see that there were lots of slides here. The many slides are the one that I'm not going to talk about because that is the one that's going to be shared with people. So that's why, I don't, and I also feel that there should be a focus about my talk. Now, first of all, we'll talk about, what I'm doing today. So you will find that I'm going to talk about the summary of about 159 Hong Kong University students, their response to a questionnaire. And also another 132 United States students, responses to a similar questionnaire, but that has been adapted because the issue is language, right? I mean, Hong Kong students learn English as a arguably foreign language. I mean, even at the time when I was collecting the data. And then the American students, they don't learn English as a second language because the university that I went to collect data, they basically put predominantly just local Midwestern students there with very few international students there. And then I want to talk about the possible preliminary hypothesis, and also the types of jokes that they liked. So before that, I said I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to tell you a story. Once upon a time, okay, that is my learning journey. I studied history, but then I met a lot of friends, from America when I was, doing my undergraduate study. But after going to society to work, and I thought that I wouldn't want to see them. I miss them a lot. So I decided that I would go to America to see them. But it was so expensive. So that's why I thought, how could I actually see all my friends, in just 1 month so I thought, well, and also I need to give up my career when I was working for the government at that time with a well-paid job. So I thought I need to do something meaningful, maybe advancing myself. So I decided to go to study TESL because I think my history GPA was not very good. So that I think, that would be a good option. And plus, I really enjoy using the language. So I went to America, to do it. And I think John earlier mentioned about the incongruity theory about words that may have different meanings here. And I remember that. And there are many, many instances in my learning journey, because that's why we focus on learning. And that's why I wanted to do this, as you thought about my experience as a learner. Is it similar? Does it have resonance, with the learners that I was teaching much later, in that part? The incident that I remember was being an international student. We were going to a conference, because we wrote some papers together, with my professors, there. And I didn't want to drive because my car was a lemon, and it was a long distance. So my two professors offered a free ride for me for that, and I wanted to contribute money, but they say, no, you are graduate students. So when we talk about something, and then I was meaning that I would say, it doesn't ring a bell, okay? But then there was a song ringing in my head that ring my bell. And I said it, which means that do you remember this, or does it sound familiar? And then the two professors, they were laughing. And I thought, okay, what are you laughing about? And then I say, they explained the difference for me. And of course, at that moment, I was a little bit embarrassed. But because we had a very good relationship, they explained it to me. So now, after 30 years, so you can see how old I am, I can still remember, that instance. But of course, you live in another country, then you will also have a lot of instances, of miscommunication because of, language. And I find that the most of the time I remember most is the one that I actually make mistakes. And it is also a funny mistake. And that brought me, the idea that, well, humor, apart from being embarrassed, but I have a very thick face, so I guess maybe it doesn't bother me as much. It will be a good tool, for learning. So when I started teaching and I collected students, perceptions about the use of humor in the classroom, and consistent with the research findings, they were all positively correlated. They believe, this will be helping with their learning, retention of their memory, retention of attention, retention, and also many, many benefits. Nothing, mentioned about the negative benefits, negative benefits. How can you have negative benefits? The negative shortcomings, that. So I thought, I'm pretty convicted, that would be the case. So I finished, that study with 159. So I got a data set there. And then later on, I thought, I wanted to see my friends again. So I thought, but it's not only that. I thought, okay, why their experience was different from me? Because when I was looking at the jokes, for that one, I found that these are the jokes that I really liked. And then the jokes that, they picked up didn't seem to be consistent with that. And I suddenly thought about, okay, is it because of the proficiency level? If the proficiency level is holding them back, then they would not be able, to see the essence of it. And just like, Mei Li earlier saying, if you dissect the joke and explain to it, you don't actually make it funny because it's already done already. So that's why I thought maybe, what about going to America to see really they appreciate different jokes, for that one? Because the first part, I'm pretty sure already, I have first-hand experience, and I think it's common sense that we know that, they would help. But how about the joke preferences? So the focus of today's, presentation it will be on the how they view the jokes. And if I don't use up the time, usually I have a problem of overrunning rather than not using that. I always have backup because in our university, our students are so demanding that, okay, when you see them, your face is like, okay, I'm doing texting, I'm doing anything. That means that, I should move on, for that one. If I move on quickly, then I have some backup plans, for that. Okay, so I think this is, so this one is from a Midwestern university, and that actually is my alma mater, or I don't know, no. So the university I graduated with the MA program, and this is the university, and I will tell you which university in Hong Kong after the presentation, if you ask me. Okay, now these will be the kind of things, so this was a quantitative study. I'm not going to drill on that one because I could actually explain it for 5 minutes, how I collected the data and all those things. And in fact, I already removed the demographics because the demographic didn't actually speak a lot of things here. So they're kind of comparable in terms of, the analysis. They were also quantitative about, how. So now the question is, how did I do it quantitatively? That is kind of things here. So the question, it was through a questionnaire, kind of format. And I did that in Hong Kong first. So I basically collected information about their learning style. And I think I asked them to see whether they have any perception. And you may wonder, why do I have to ask them about the perception? My hypothesis was if they had a negative perception of humor in the classroom, then they might not appreciate jokes already, because because I would assume there should be a positive relationship. You appreciate, jokes, and then jokes is a part of humor, and then you will help you, with your learning. And then the second part is actually about the process. So the process, how is it different, from the general classroom? The general classroom does not have any relation, does not have any reference to activities that have like elements of language learning. But this Section C has, like, for example, sitcoms, specific, kind of language learning. For example, vocabulary, grammar, and all those kind of things here. In fact, there was a book. Well, there's a book actually in my bag now that I use that actually you can teach all grammar rules, for those English teachers, here. You can bid, I can actually loan it to you because I think it's not printed in print anymore for that. So basically, any English grammar rules, you can learn it from that worksheet, which is a book of that one here. And then, of course, E, okay, so then there will be Section E, there will be 6 questions, and 6 questions, they were only for Hong Kong students because I want to ease them into, because it's an ESL classroom. But F and also F is the 36 jokes that I have classified into 7 types. And then I want to see whether they are actually, the student will interpret those jokes with the same type, or just randomly. I want to see if language barrier could actually produce some kind of obstacle of getting the jokes types, in order. So, but I will tell you later. And then, of course, after the 36 jokes, well, what do you get? You get a lot of number, okay? You may have like 36 jokes with the same number. If they're all funny, what do you do, right? I mean, like, or none of them is funny at all. They're just like rubbish, for them. So that's why I asked them to rank order the 30 jokes again. And then when we rank order, so how do you do analysis, from the statistical point of view? So then I have a trick. I think this probably is not very scientific. And that was before my PhD days, when I did that. So I calculate the score based on 1 to 6 in their order. And then altogether, because some people would say, this is my most favorite joke, they will award 6. Some people, they would say, it's still my favorite joke, but it's only, 1 in that. So in that case, I can increase the count, so that I can see, well, maybe this is not, like the best joke for everyone, but at least I can actually see most people would regard this as most funny. So that's why you can actually see that Section G is there. And of course, the Section H. But Section H is not it's not just using the bottom number. I also asked them to look at again. So they basically are trying to eliminate 6 jokes that I would not use, because if the next funny jokes, they're all there, so I will remove the database. And I was going to use this for my PhD study, but it wasn't as usual. Just like Forrest Gump said, life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. So that is also the reason that I moved into psychology rather than this part here. And then, of course, have the multi-dimensional. So I'm not going to bore you with that. So Section 8 general information, there shouldn't be any, reliability because they're all from different walks of life. But consistently, I think the part, the funniest level has very consistent level, for that part here. It could be also that because the database has it's larger, and also it's got like 36 jokes. If I look at the American, you can see there are fewer columns. Because I had to adapt, the questionnaire, because I had to go through the ethics clearance. And also, maybe it's not appropriate to say it here, but I'm going to say it anyway. So probably because I'm old, and maybe if I lose my job, it's not going to be the end of the world. Because American students, from my experience, because I was a TA, when I was doing my master's work there, the student tended to have a very low attention span. So they would not sit there for half an hour and 45 minutes. So then I will remove it. But another thing is, because there are also some items, some sections that were not relevant to them, because as I said, they were native speakers of English. Why would I ask students who are not an English language, second language students, their perception of using English jokes in a second language classroom? Right? If it's Spanish, that's fine, but what about English? So that's why, and then I wouldn't be able to find enough students, to fill up my pool if they will just look for Spanish or other, second language, students in America. So I find that, mostly, they are similar, in the size of them. The demographics were also similar. The Hong Kong students were more homogeneous group as well, because they are undergraduate students. The American students were also more or less homogeneous, but was it John, you said like there was a non-traditional student, or some other speakers said they had non-traditional students in the classroom? Yeah. I also have non-traditional classroom in my class, for that one. So, but for me, like traditional, non-traditional, it didn't make any difference because I spoke English as a second language. So I guess maybe the communication was limited in the level that is in the understanding or the comprehension, kind of part of it here. But more or less, I would see them as homogeneous as well. So these are the jokes, that you can see. So that is, you can actually see the number, why they were 36, because any, students, from the pool, they listed into the top 5, then I will calculate into the total sum number. And then I would use that to rank all the top 6, jokes for that. So this one must be oral, okay? So this looks like it's an ESL kind of joke, for that one. We'll see whether the American students will like it. And you can keep thinking it and try to tell me whether you're guessing it will be right as well, with the American perspective. Or California is a fine place to live if you happen to be in an orange. If you were my husband, I would put poison in your tea. If you were my wife, I would drink it. So you can actually see there's some kind of aggression in it as well. This one, I think I used to find it funny, but now I don't see it funny at all. I used to be able to explain why it is funny. I think maybe Orange County, or maybe it's just like students, they think orange is, coming from California, like sun-kissed, orange, that kind of thing. So they kind of, or maybe misinterpretation anyway. But now you already know that this is not the funny jokes, that the American students would like. Okay, this part here. Okay, moving on to the next one. Am I moving to the next one already? I think I'm so nervous that my hands are sweating, so I think it's not moving very well. Okay, all right, still the top funniest. So you can see about 45 responses out of them. They will see this joke as top, 6 of them already. How did it come up with the brand name Ford for cars? I don't know, but I think it stands for something. It stands for fails on rainy days, or fix on or repair daily. So that part. So they find it funny. And then this one, how did you keep fish from smelling? Cut off the noses, okay? Well, that certainly is an incongruity, right? Smelling is like, it's rotten, so it's generating, smell, for that one. See, but cut off whose noses? then you think about it's more than just that meaning, because that has a bit of dark humor, just like, you will have to think about they're human. So if you don't have your nose, then you can't smell it. Or you can actually, yeah. So smelling from the fish point of view is that fish can smell. So you cut off the nose. So now I'm demonstrating, once you dissect the joke, the frog will die. Okay, so what does BMW stand for? Big money waste or brutal money waste? I think, if you look at this part already, we got 2 car jokes already. And then you think about like Hong Kong, like we have a lot of cars, right? But you can also think about, I guess maybe at the time when I was teaching, there were not many people driving cars, and at least not my university students, that would, think about it, but they would know about it. It would be something associated with kind of like, luxury items and all those kind of thing. And then they would kind of think about it, as, oh, wow, funny. I make joke of something that I don't have, or maybe I make joke of something that, well, I didn't know that. So that is kind of a surprise, kind of moment. Now, let's go move into my alma mater, did I move it to the American one yet? Okay. Okay, so this is their top jokes. Sign in a Rome dry cleaner's shop. Leave your clothes here and spend the afternoon having a good time. Now, that one, arguably, is the interpretation. Okay, leave your clothes here. Maybe a little bit salacious, you say, leave your clothes here, but at least you have the swim clothes, for that, if you are by a swimming pool, okay, but what about leave your clothes here? So that is the part, they find it funny. Maybe that's the interpretation, a bit of sex, in that. I think sex is kind of a forbidden subject. And I think for that, people use this as a release, and then they would actually look at, it doesn't mean that they would actually commit, whatever, or do something, but it's like a fantasy and also reality kind of playing differentiation. Okay, now this is the joke that is common between the 2, groups there already. I don't suffer from insanity. I enjoy every minute of it. So this is a weird saying. Sign in the Budapest, zoo. Please do not feed the animals. If you have any suitable food, give it to the guard on duty. Okay. So yeah, I think it's like about feeding the animal or feeding the guard on duty, for that part. All right. So top funniest. How am I doing with time? I only have about 5 minutes, so I think I have to quickly wrap up, for that one. So for the other top funniest, this one I always know when is the mother-in-law at the door, because as soon as they hear her knock, all the mice start throwing themselves into the trap. So a bit of aggression here. Always borrow money from a pessimist. He doesn't expect to be paid back. Okay, so that will be try not to have a good time. This is supposed to be educational. Now, the next 2 lines about the least funniest. So I'm not going to bore you with that, because why people want to hear like things that doesn't actually give enjoyment, for that. So I skip that. So I go into my analysis already, which is that part. Well, so this is just to show you that I did the work. I didn't actually make up the data, for that one here. Okay, so this is, I ran what we call factor analysis to look at, the data and to see whether there is a structure or a latent structure, to see whether through the responses, some clear patterns are actually what we call, they exist. So my conclusion is, in the Hong Kong student survey, I tried to put down, these kind of like what we call types. Okay, so the database were based on, the my text analysis on whether they consider surface structure or deep structure, that kind of thing. They did not make this. And then the grouping do not also conform to analysis, and then the loadings and also quite, fall into more than one factor. But the native speaker English American student, they did actually make a service structure here, because the grouping could go from the 12 items, could go into 7 items. And through the text analysis, they were consistent, in that part here. Okay, so what will be the conclusion? Well, there is a joke about it. The conclusion is simply a place when people are tired of thinking. So basically, this is the part that we don't want to think anymore. So we just dive into it, what it is. Okay, so I think like, this part, in terms of the factor analysis, the difference is I wasn't able to classify from the Hong Kong students, but in the American, I was able to do it. So in terms of that, so verbal at least is actually a type you can actually work on. And particularly in humor, you can actually do, in jokes, you can actually do that. Okay, so the second one is the appreciation. So in terms of funny, they don't find it the same, find funny jokes the same way, okay, between the two groups, but they are more consistent if they find something that's not funny. But even so, they are still the least funniest joke. They will still be some people in America, some people in Hong Kong, they will still find it funny, but they're just not the majority because statistically, they're still present. It's not zero. So that's why, I think maybe it gives me the idea that maybe there is some we can actually deduct that is about the universality of the jokes here. So I think that's all the time. Oh, we have 5 minutes. If I deprive your opportunity to ask questions, I could probably do that. Okay, so this one, while there's some jokes they receive good rating from one group, and there are also who find it less funny. So that's fine. That's universal. We can actually see it. The key here is, even though some people will find it funny, some other people will not funny, but it doesn't mean that majority wins because we're human beings, right? I mean, the thing is, we're not doing it as a medicine, whether this is effective, this kind of like the efficacy, how many will be cured, for that. So I think we could still, try to see, depending on, how you would want to use it, as well. So what is the implication? So one group preference do not automatically extend to another group, but it is actually quite consistent. If I look at the pattern, the American students, they tend to like similar jokes. And the Hong Kong students, they also tend to like similar jokes in terms of the frequency. So I can actually see within group is consistent, but across group, they are very different, except for that one. Now, I think that was the part that I was prepared, to go into if I go the super fast mode and I have a lot of time, that will be that part. But that's also not really from the students, but the student part, the learning part is done. Thank you. For the slides, actually, the slide will be available. You could probably see it all together. There are about 55 slides, and they were about 10 or 12 slides. And I think actually it goes well with Mei Li's, talk about. I also use, the Bloom's taxonomy to illustrate that, once, you cannot get them to understand. So my proposal is that to ask them to analyze jokes as an activity to go into the evaluation part, because, that will be. Because lots of the can be done in English language learning. You can have fill in the blanks, and you can actually get them to think about how the word can be changed in a funny way. Okay, thank you, Willie.
All right. Yeah. Does the audience have any questions to ask? Do we have any questions from the audience?
Wow, we have early
right.
break.
Yeah. We have one question here. There's one here as well.
Thank you so much. I learned so much from your study. I probably didn't catch it. It might be on the slide, but I was wondering, like, for the American students and the Hong Kong students, which category of jokes are most appreciated from both populations?
I think it's the one with aggression. Like, if you were my husband, then I would poison your tea. And if you were my wife, I would drink it.
How about, I meant that, like, for the Americans, what category of joke do they appreciate? And then for the
I
Hong
see
Kong
what you mean.
students, what category?
Yeah.
They know, like, puns and all that kind
Yeah,
of
I think like for the Hong Kong students, definitely puns, like the multiple meaning part, of that as well. But for the American, I think there's a bit more aggression because I think that goes into the incongruity part, that, like the fantasy and also the reality part, for that. Because if I look at the 6, there's some elements of, kind of, aggression there, except from the one that is like is supposed to be educational, it can't be funny, for that part. Yeah. But I would feel that, they're more, maybe you can say open, in terms of their, they can see the reality and the fantasy very, very, divided. And they can actually exercise, but maybe the Hong Kong students didn't actually see that part there as well. They may not see that it's not real. So then in that case, like if they don't see the divide as real, then they may still stay in the reality plane. They say, okay, why this is funny? Because I don't see how that could happen, in that part,
Thank you so much. Thank
Okay,
you.
all right. So
Right.
I don't usually make myself understood anyway. So yeah.
Right.
So,
And Benjamin, we do have
sorry.
like 3 questions from the same
sorry.
person on Zoom. So how was humor defined in your study? And do you think the reason for not finding the humor statements funny was related to situational or contextual factors?
Yeah. Well, okay. So for the first question, so my study actually, because I only reported on the jokes, for that one, because the selection was done because of the constraint of time. So in my study, I defined it as the attitude towards, humor used in the classroom, in the learning process. And for the Hong Kong students is in the English language classrooms, okay? The jokes is just kind of additional, kind of elements, to make it kind of see, okay, because from my experience, I find certain jokes funny. And I want to see whether the students that I was teaching would find the same jokes as mine. The second question, do you think that the reason behind not finding some of the humor students? I would probably think, yeah, but I think jokes is probably pretty stable in terms of measurements because, like jokes is usually looking at, the words, for that one. So I probably say, if they don't find it funny, it's just they don't find it funny because they're doing a questionnaire. I mean, a questionnaire is a serious business, right? I mean, they just like use their perception. Okay, I like it. Well, but I would probably say they're affected, by, their mood, for example, or maybe certain words that could be a trigger, to the memory experience. Is the difference between related? Yeah, that's just the question that I was always wondering about. I find that, would that be so that's why I actually did another study, and that was actually my PhD study for that one. I completely discarded, these jokes, and I had to use, another set of, I used visual humor and also verbal humor to see the correlation there. I think like, yes, I would say language. So that's why in my PhD study, I also have to test their language before I could actually get them to raise, the jokes.
Right. Yeah, thank you very much.